David Riley was the kind of man who seemed untouchable, charming, successful, and always in control, until a forgotten wallet, dropped by Trent Holloway, exposed a murder plot masterminded by Marion Frost, a woman with a stolen identity and a $2 million motive. That on a warm August morning in the quiet town of Fairview, the sun had barely risen when Michael Benton set out for his usual jog through Woodpine Park. The trail twisted through tall trees and open grass fields, a peaceful escape from the noise of everyday life. Michael wasn't expecting to find anything unusual, but about 20 minutes into his run, something shiny caught his eye near a bench just off the gravel path. He slowed down and moved closer, noticing a leather wallet half buried in the grass. It looked like it had been there for a while, maybe a couple of days. Curious, and assuming someone had simply dropped it, he picked it up. The wallet was slightly damp, the leather softened by moisture. Inside were several credit cards, a driver's license, and $200 in cash. The ID belonged to a man named David Riley. David was a name Michael recognized immediately. In a town as small as Fairview, nearly everyone knew who David Riley was. A successful real estate broker with a reputation for expensive suits, sleek cars, and million-dollar deals. His face was often seen in local magazines and on real estate signs. It was odd, Michael thought, for someone like David to lose something as personal as his wallet. He decided to take it to the local police station after his RUN at the Fairview Police Department. The desk officer logged the wallet and thanked Michael. It seemed routine at first. They would contact the owner, return his property, and that would be the end of it. But when they attempted to call the number listed on the ID, it went straight to voicemail. Repeated attempts yielded nothing. Officers ran a quick check and found no activity on David's bank cards for the last 4 days. That seemed strange for a man whose lifestyle was anything but low-key. With growing concern, they dispatched an officer to David's home for a wellness check. The house, a modern 2-story tucked into a quiet neighborhood, showed no signs of trouble. His sleek silver BMW was parked neatly in the driveway. Mail overflowed from the box, and a few Amazon packages sat untouched on the front porch. There was no answer at the door. When officers knocked louder and called out his name, still nothing. A neighbor came outside and mentioned not having seen David in nearly a week. She thought he might have gone on one of his spontaneous weekend trips. But something about the silence inside the house didn't feel right. With a search warrant in hand, investigators entered the home. Everything looked normal at first. The furniture was in place, the lights were off, and there was no sign of forced entry. Upstairs, the bed was made. Clothes were hanging neatly in the closet. Downstairs, the kitchen was clean. But then the tech team discovered something unsettling. Every security camera in the house, both inside and outside, had been turned off 4 days ago. Not disabled, just powered down, all at once. The system's last recording showed David arriving home alone one evening, locking the door behind him. After that, nothing. It was the first real clue that something might be wrong. The house hadn't been broken into. David hadn't packed any bags. There was no note, no signs of distress. Yet the absence of movement and the carefully shut down cameras suggested planning. Not a sudden disappearance, but something methodical. The kind of silence that didn't feel like an accident. Detectives began combing through David's recent activity. His calendar showed multiple meetings canceled with vague excuses. No new listings had been uploaded on his real estate profile. He hadn't posted on social media in days, something unusual for someone who regularly shared updates about his latest properties. His assistant reported receiving an odd text message from him that simply read, "Taking some time off." When asked if the message seemed out of character, she paused before admitting it didn't sound like his usual way of speaking. Back at the park, a team of officers returned to the area where the wallet had been found. They searched the surrounding grass, trash cans, even the trail itself. Nothing else turned up. No footprints, no drag marks, no signs of a struggle. The bench where the wallet had been found sat facing a wide-open field, with no nearby houses or cameras. Whoever dropped it hadn't wanted it found, or maybe hadn't realized they had dropped it at all. It was a small mistake, one that might have gone unnoticed if not for a curious jogger in a town where everyone knew each other's name. But as investigators would soon discover, that wallet, dropped so carelessly, was the first piece of a puzzle far darker than anyone imagined. The mystery surrounding David Riley's disappearance deepened quickly, as word spread through Fairview that the well-known real estate broker hadn't been seen or heard from in nearly a week. Speculation filled the air. Some believed he had taken an unannounced vacation, maybe a last-minute business retreat. Others whispered darker theories. But for the Fairview Police Department, the priority was simple: find out what had happened to David and where he had gone. Investigators dug into David's phone records, hoping to trace his final days. Most of the calls and texts were routine: clients, co-workers, and his personal assistant, Lily Hawthorne. But there was one number that appeared repeatedly over the last few weeks. It wasn't saved in his contacts, and it didn't belong to any known associate. The calls had become more frequent in the days just before he vanished, some lasting nearly an hour. When police traced the number, they hit a wall. It was a prepaid burner phone, registered under the name John Mercer, which led nowhere. Meanwhile, David's financial activity came under review. His accounts showed no withdrawals or unusual purchases. No hotels, flights, or rental cars were booked under his name. But one payment stood out. 3 days before his disappearance, David had paid a large deposit, $30,000, to a private account, labeled as a business investment. The recipient, Laura Miles. Detectives searched her name and found little: no criminal record, no social media footprint, and no official address in Fairview. But buried in his work files, they found her name, attached to a property inquiry. She had contacted David about buying an isolated piece of land just outside the city limits. Detectives contacted Laura and asked her to come in for questioning. She arrived on time, dressed in a professional blouse and blazer, calm and composed. She claimed she and David had met for a dinner meeting 5 days ago to discuss a private real estate deal. According to her, David seemed distracted, maybe even anxious, but nothing unusual enough to raise suspicion. She told investigators that they ended the evening cordially and went their separate ways. When asked why she hadn't followed up after hearing of his disappearance, she explained that she thought he had simply backed out of their agreement. It wasn't uncommon in her experience, she said, especially when large sums of money were involved. Detectives found no immediate holes. In her story, her phone records showed she had been near the restaurant at the time she claimed, and her car's GPS confirmed her route home. Still, something about her felt too polished. She offered just enough detail to sound convincing, but never more than what was asked. It wasn't enough to hold her, but it was enough to keep her on their radar. As they continued to investigate Laura, they uncovered something else: a contract in David's files showing her intent to purchase the rural estate. But the paperwork was flawed. The signature didn't match known samples from David, and there was no evidence of a wire transfer or bank deposit. It looked legitimate at first glance, but it quickly fell apart under scrutiny. Detectives suspected the documents had been created to appear official, but were nothing more than an elaborate forgery. The pressure mounted when the forensic team completed analysis on David's home security system. It had been remotely accessed and disabled from a device that wasn't his. The login trail led to an IP address registered to a public library across town. Security footage from the library showed a man sitting at a computer the exact moment the system was disabled. He wore a baseball cap, sunglasses, and kept his head low. Facial recognition software returned no matches, but something about him looked familiar to a retired officer reviewing the footage. He identified the man as Trent Holloway, a former police officer who had been dismissed from the force years ago and later worked private security for David Riley during a property dispute. It was the break they needed. David's old employee, off the radar for years, had quietly re-entered his life. The same man caught on surveillance just before the security system was turned off. The same man now tied to a burner phone that had been in constant contact with David before he disappeared. Everything was starting to connect. The mystery woman with forged contracts, the silent phone records, the burner phone, and now, a disgraced ex-cop with access to surveillance tools and just enough knowledge to cover his tracks. But one thing he hadn't covered was the wallet. That one mistake, dropped in the park by accident or carelessness, was the single thread that had led investigators here. Now, the case was no longer about a missing person. It was transforming into something far more dangerous. The discovery of David Riley's connection to both Laura Miles and Trent Holloway had shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to something far more sinister. Detectives began combing through every corner of David's personal and professional life, searching for any trace that might lead them to his location. As they mapped out his schedule, contacts, and recent activities, one peculiar entry caught their attention. A rural estate, never listed publicly, showed up in his digital calendar as a private showing. The meeting was scheduled for 2 days before he vanished and was marked with the initials L.M. The property in question was located about 20 miles outside Fairview. It was an old, overgrown lot with a small, rundown house and several acres of woods surrounding it. Records showed that David had recently reacquired the listing through a private sale, but hadn't posted it online or advertised it in any way. The land had no utilities running, no neighbors for at least a mile, and hadn't been touched in years. The perfect place for a quiet meeting, or something far more deliberate. When investigators arrived at the estate, the house was locked and appeared abandoned. The windows were dusty, the porch sagged from rot, and the roof had started to cave in. Weeds crawled over the broken fence. But when officers circled the house, they noticed something odd: fresh tire tracks leading to the back entrance and muddy boot prints near the rear door. It was clear someone had been there recently. They forced entry and moved cautiously through the interior. The inside was cold and empty. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, paint peeled from the walls. But in the basement, a different scene unfolded. A newer section of floor stood out against the cracked concrete, a patch that had been poured recently. It wasn't polished like the rest and didn't match the color or texture. Investigators tapped on it. The echo revealed a hollow sound beneath. They pried it open, piece by piece, until a trapdoor was uncovered. Below it was a narrow set of stairs descending into a concrete bunker. It was barely lit and smelled of damp earth and chemicals. What they found inside would change the case entirely. In the middle of the room lay David Riley. His body was bound and covered in a tarp. Nearby were rolls of duct tape, surgical gloves, and a toolbox filled with items that looked like they were meant to dispose of evidence. Based on early signs, he had been dead for several days. The bunker showed no signs of struggle. It was methodical, calculated. Whoever had done this had taken their time, but they hadn't been careful enough. On a metal doorknob leading into the bunker, forensic analysts lifted 2 clear fingerprints. A match came back almost immediately. Trent Holloway. His print had been in the system since his dismissal from law enforcement. Alongside the prints, police found receipts for recently purchased supplies, cleaning chemicals, rope, gloves, all bought with cash from a small hardware store in the next town over. Surveillance footage confirmed Trent as the buyer. Meanwhile, detectives re-examined the security footage from the library where Trent had accessed David's camera system. A time-stamped screenshot placed him at the library the same day the cameras went dark. His burner phone, traced through metadata, had pinged off a tower near the rural property 2 hours later. The digital trail was closing in on him from all Sides. The case against Trent was building fast. But questions still remained. Why would he target David after so many years? What was the motive? And what was Laura's real role in all of this? When they looked deeper into Laura's background, they uncovered the truth. Her real name wasn't Laura Miles. It was Marianne Frost. Years ago, she had been involved in a multi-state fraud case under yet another alias. She had vanished before trial and resurfaced in Fairview with a new identity. Her connection to Trent wasn't random either. A deep dive into her email metadata and phone history revealed frequent contact with Trent, often masked by VPNs and burner phones. They had crafted a plan together. Lure David to the estate using a fake investment opportunity, isolate him, and remove him. Everything from the forged contract to the false dinner meeting had been part of a layered deception. But it had come undone the moment Trent dropped David's wallet at the park, thinking no one would ever tie it back to a crime. Scene not yet discovered. With David's body recovered, the case had now become a full homicide investigation. The pieces were falling into place rapidly, and law enforcement prepared for arrests. The trapdoor beneath that forgotten estate had opened more than a hidden room. It had exposed a murder planned with chilling precision. The discovery of David Riley's body confirmed investigators' worst fears, but it also ignited a race to secure evidence before the two people responsible could vanish. Trent Holloway, now officially a suspect in a high-profile homicide, had already disappeared. The fingerprints, the receipts, and the surveillance footage formed a solid case. But unless they could catch him and his accomplice, justice would remain out of reach. And Laura Miles, now known to be Marianne Frost, was no longer answering calls or appearing at her listed address. She, too, had vanished without a trace. Detectives returned to David's financial records, this time with a new focus. They searched for anything connecting him to life insurance policies or large financial assets that could have motivated the crime. What they found added a stunning layer to the case. Just 3 weeks before his disappearance, David had made a change to his primary life insurance policy, replacing his estranged brother as the beneficiary with someone named Marianne Frost. At the time, the name raised no red flags, likely due to the forged documentation she submitted during the policy update. She had listed herself as David's business partner and emergency contact, complete with a fake company website and references. No one had verified it closely enough. 2. The insurance company. She seemed legitimate that IT was clear now. The motive wasn't personal revenge or random violence. It was money. Nearly $2 million, all set to be transferred to Marianne within weeks of David's presumed death. The entire plot had been engineered for a payout. The fraud, the forged documents, the fake relationship they had created, an elaborate web around David, drawing him into a trap under the illusion of business opportunity. Every move had been calculated, rehearsed, and executed with disturbing patience. The team investigating the case brought in a digital forensics expert to analyze the burner phones used by both suspects. Though many records were wiped, fragments of messages and call logs still lingered. Using cell tower data, analysts were able to trace the phone's movements across multiple states. One phone, believed to belong to Trent, had last pinged in Missouri. The other, suspected to be Marianne's, appeared briefly in Colorado before going silent. But a new lead emerged from a routine alert set by the state's vehicle registry. A license plate linked to a rental car under one of Marianne's old aliases was flagged in a small Colorado mountain town. Local authorities were alerted and dispatched to the area. They located the vehicle parked behind a remote cabin. It was hidden from the road, surrounded by dense trees, and backed up against a steep ravine. Inside the cabin, they found Marianne. She was alone, calm, and holding a stack of fake passports and over $15,000 in cash. She didn't attempt to run. She didn't protest. She surrendered quietly, as if she had rehearsed that part too. her arrest was only the beginning. Under interrogation, Marianne offered no cooperation. She refused to confirm her real identity, refused to speak about David, and denied knowing Trent Holloway at all. But the evidence was too overwhelming. A handwriting expert confirmed she had signed the forged contract found in David's office. Her fingerprints matched several found in the trapdoor bunker, including on the plastic wrap used to conceal the body. Her digital trail, scrubbed but not clean enough, linked her to every phase of the crime. While Marianne remained silent, Trent's luck ran out as well. He was picked up days later in Kansas, staying in a roadside motel under another alias. Surveillance cameras showed him coming and going wearing sunglasses and a hooded sweatshirt, using cash to pay for everything. But once captured, he confessed quickly, folding under the pressure. He admitted to his role in the murder and confirmed that Marianne had orchestrated nearly every part of the plan. She had studied David, learned his habits, created the fake investment scheme, and used Trent to execute the violent end. According to him, Marianne had no emotion during the killing. She was focused, calm, and determined. The confession filled in the missing pieces. The motive was clear. The roles were defined. But the most chilling detail wasn't what they did. It was how long they had planned it. Investigators found early drafts of their forged documents dating back nearly a year. They had watched David from the shadows, step by step, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was a murder designed to look like a disappearance, built to confuse, delay, and deflect. And it might have worked, if not for a single, careless error. That wallet in the park, forgotten or dropped by Trent during the disposal phase, had shattered their perfect plan. A random jogger's curiosity had lit a fuse that tore their plot wide open. And now, the once untouchable team of fraud and murder stood exposed, not because of advanced forensics or secret recordings, but because of one mistake too small for them to notice. The trial of Marianne Frost and Trent Holloway was unlike anything the town of Fairview had seen before. The courtroom was filled every day with reporters, neighbors, and those who had known David Riley in life. What had begun as a missing person case had unfolded into a meticulous, calculated murder driven by greed and executed with chilling precision. Yet the most haunting part of the trial wasn't just the evidence presented. It was the realization of how close the killers had come to getting away with it. Trent's confession had laid out the entire timeline. After reconnecting with Marianne, through a mutual contact from his security days, they had spent months crafting the plan. Marianne had targeted David deliberately, knowing his routine, personality, and weaknesses. She had studied his financial history, knew his business had been slowing down, and saw an opportunity to present herself as a wealthy client with an exclusive land deal. David, eager for a high-commission sale and perhaps flattered by her attention, walked straight into her trap. While Marianne played the role of a serious investor, Trent operated behind the scenes. He hacked David's security systems, intercepted emails, and erased any trail that might expose their coordination. The rural property had been selected early on, purchased under a fake LLC and modified to include the underground bunker. They hadn't intended to torture David or prolong the act. According to Trent, the goal was to make him disappear without a trace, just a vanishing act, no questions asked, until the insurance money was released. But the problem began after the murder. In the confusion and rush to stage the scene, Trent had accidentally dropped David's wallet during a late-night drive through Woodpine Park. He hadn't noticed it missing until hours later. By then, the wallet had already been found by Michael Benton, the jogger, and turned over to police. That one small item had broken the illusion they had worked so hard to build. From there, the lies unraveled faster than either could contain. During the trial, Marianne sat mostly in silence. Her lawyers argued that Trent had manipulated her, that she was not directly involved in the murder, and that her signature on the insurance forms didn't prove intent. But the evidence stacked against her was overwhelming. The fingerprint matches, the forged documents, the burner phone logs, and Trent's detailed testimony painted a picture of a woman who had orchestrated nearly every step. She may not have pulled the trigger or tied the knots, but she had laid out the entire blueprint. Trent, meanwhile, showed signs of remorse. On the stand, he admitted that the plan had gone too far, that he had believed no one would truly get hurt, but his words carried little weight. The cold, calculated nature of the crime overshadowed any claim of regret. The jury saw through it quickly. After weeks of testimony, the verdicts came in. Trent Holloway was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and unlawful disposal of a body. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marianne Frost was convicted of conspiracy, insurance fraud, identity theft, and accessory to murder. Her sentence, 40 years in a maximum security facility, reflected both her central role in the plan and her lack of direct physical involvement in the killing. She showed no reaction as the sentence was read. David Riley's family released a statement shortly after the trial, expressing gratitude to law enforcement and the community for their support. They spoke of David's kindness, ambition, and trusting nature, qualities that, tragically, had been exploited. His younger sister, Sarah, delivered a quiet but powerful message at the sentencing hearing. She said that her brother had spent his life believing in second chances, never suspecting that someone he welcomed into his world could be plotting his end. The town slowly returned to normal, but the story lingered. It became a cautionary tale about trust, appearances, and the dangers hidden behind well-crafted lies. The fact that such a sophisticated plan was undone by something as small as a lost wallet was a reminder of how fragile even the best criminal plots can be. In the end, justice wasn't served by a breakthrough in technology or a high-level confession. It came from a jogger's good deed, a found wallet, and a police department that chose to keep digging even when things didn't seem urgent. One mistake had exposed everything. Marianne and Trent had bet on a perfect crime. But perfect doesn't exist. Not when human error is always waiting in the wings. And in their case, that error was all it took to bring down an empire of lies.